How is it that the second largest continent in the world, Africa, is not part of the UN Security Council? African countries should tell the UN that they will no longer recognize the Security Council if an African country or Africa is not a permanent member of the UN Security Council. When they humiliate us, it is not just because they are just trying to be the bad guy. It is meant to make you feel a lot smaller. It is meant to erode your self-worth so that you begin questioning the very essence of who you are. Ramaphosa, 50 years from now, nobody who is going to be talking about that Oval Office in a positive light. The current diplomatic relationships we have masquerade as healthy relationships, but they are in fact toxic relationships.
Yes.
And the proof of that is the fact that half of people in sub-Saharan Africa are today, as you and I speak, living in abject poverty. Yet, the West has been giving all that aid, yet we have had these seemingly healthy relationships.
Yes.
But Africa is no better off.
When it comes now to the, broadly, the solutions, what do we have to do as Africans?
We cannot be yes men and yes women. We cannot be yes nations, that when they say jump, we jump, sit, we sit, sit in the bus, literally we are sitting in the bus. Let us go back to Lumumbaism. And Lumumbaism is simply the African standing tall, standing proud, the African knowing that he and or she is enough. It's completely enough, and nobody should ever belittle you.
Hi guys, welcome to today's episode of LNS. My name is Lynn Ngugi, and I want to start by appreciating you for tuning in. Honestly, every time you guys tune in on this platform and you get to participate in these conversations, that's not something I take for granted. So welcome, Sana, and also a warm welcome to our new subscribers. I hope you feel at home. Now, on today's episode, when we witnessed the public humiliation of South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, what most of us saw was the embarrassment. It was him not being given the opportunity to speak. It was Trump humiliating him. But when I thought deeper, and when we sat with DJ, I asked him, what do these embarrassments mean? Especially you see them being accorded to a lot of African presidents. What is it that we don't get to see when it comes to these embarrassments? And today he's going to break it down for us, because it's not just the embarrassment, it's the deeper meaning in these rituals that happen to African presidents. So we're about to get into this very beautiful conversation with, of course, as I said, DJ Wakali. But before that, I also want to say thank you guys for the support that you've accorded this man on his platform. He has an amazing platform now, and he has been able to upload a couple of videos, and I love the engagement in those videos. So if you've not subscribed to his channel, this is not him asking me to say this. This is me saying this from the bottom of my heart. Why don't you subscribe? Because there's a lot of learning, unlearning, and relearning to do on that platform. Now let's get into our topic of the day. So without further ado, please allow me to let DJ introduce himself for the people who are tuning in for the very first time. DJ?
Great, thank you. I'm doing great, Lynn.
How are you
feeling?
feeling?
Doing great.
Yes.
Awesome.
Good to see you again.
Same here.
Yes.
It's another beautiful day here in the motherland.
Here in the motherland.
Yeah.
We are about to get into another one and
Yes.
another one and another one. As I said,
Absolutely.
I love having these conversations with you. Honestly, sometimes you're the highlight of my week. I'm like,
thank you.
God, I have a show with DJ. I have a show with DJ. Very interesting for me.
Thank you.
But some of the people are tuning in for the very first time. Maybe could you start by introducing yourself and tell them what you do?
Great. My name's DJ Wakali.
Yeah.
And as I always say, I'm an African currently living in Kenya, because I absolutely believe that Africa, the motherland, is a place to be, and it is our duty as today's generation of Africans to transform Africa into the place that it's supposed to be, a place where every single African can live a life of dignity, can celebrate being here in the motherland. And I'm also a writer, I love writing a lot because I love to tell the stories of Africa, because we need to own our narrative. And that's exactly what Lynn is doing right here on this show, LNN, helping Africa to begin telling our own narratives. Yeah.
Great. Happy to have you here. And as you know, sometimes when I look at me and you having a conversation, it gives me hope. Because a couple of years back, I wasn't interested. Honestly, I was just existing as an African. I wasn't living. Things would happen. You have the headlines and you're like, okay, that's not my problem. That's a they problem.
Yes.
And then later on, you get to understand this is all by design. Us getting to ignore things that are happening right in front of us. This is something that is programmed in us so that we don't get to see the value and we don't get to question some of the things that are happening. So when I'm having this conversation with you and I see the engagement with our audience, even on our platform, both on our platform and also your platform on YouTube, that really makes me happy. The awakening is happening.
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing to witness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But it just occurred, DJ. I've never asked you.
Yeah.
DJ. What does DJ stand for? If you are free to say that.
Absolutely.
I never asked you that question.
Actually, DJ, that's David John.
Yes.
Only that now I just use the initials.
Yeah.
I do not, I'm not against the so-called English names, but I just think it sounds better as DJ.
You love Wakali.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What is that one thing, maybe before we get into our conversation of the day, what's one thing you are having to unlearn as Wakali that has been taught to you, and you are unlearning that which has been taught to you?
Oh, that's a really great question. And to be honest, when you talk about unlearning, I think one of the things that is really powerful about LNN, the show, is this focus on learning, relearning, and learning. It is so important. And when you put it personally like that, and I look at my own life, one thing that definitely comes out is I have had to unlearn. Growing up, like most Africans, you grow up looking at Africa as a place that doesn't have a lot of opportunities. And whereas that may be true on the surface, it is not true at a deeper level. So I've had to unlearn the fact that there isn't enough here in Africa for all the 1.5 billion Africans. Now I know that there is enough here in Africa for all the 1.5 billion Africans.
Yes.
Enough jobs, enough food, enough opportunities. And that's something I've had to, to really get at a core level. That's why I really believe in the African awakening.
I love that, a lot of unlearning to do. I was with Winnie here the other day and we were talking about our hair even as African women. And it's funny how we grew up thinking the straighter and the softer and the texturized, the better. I have no problem with anyone who is doing it that way, but I kind of feel like I should have been left to experience this. I should have shown up in class like this.
Yes.
I should have been told I am enough. We are talking about Africa being enough as a continent for the 1.5 billion of us.
Exactly.
But I wish someone also told us we are enough. Our skin, our hair, our own languages, our names. I wish someone had told us that we...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it is so true, Lynn. It is so true. And talking of Winnie, she's absolutely amazing. The work that she's doing on YouTube, Instagram, just the work that she's doing right here in Africa. I think is an example of now the kind of learning that Africans need to do.
Yes.
Because, she took the other journey back to Kenya, back to Africa rather, then settled in Kenya. And Kenya is not even the birthplace of her ancestors, if you will. But then it is also the birthplace of her ancestors because we're talking about Africa. And somebody like Winnie doing that practically begins to show us that it is not just romanticizing things when we say that Africa is for all Africans, So that is a very powerful example, and we need more of this.
Yes.
We need more of Africans to do the little and big things at their own level that help Africa to progress to the next level.
Great.
Yeah.
And now coming to our conversation of the day, it doesn't help that I thought the same of Ramaphosa when he was in the White House. All I could see was Trump thinking he's not enough. You are not enough to be here. You are not enough to have this conversation. You are not enough to tell me what I can or cannot do, right? And you could tell when he was addressing the other race, he did that with so much respect. But when it came to this president of this particular nation, the humiliation for me was more of you are not enough. That was him being told, yes, you are the president of your nation, but you are not enough. You are just a president of that nation, but you are not enough. And that forms the basis of our conversation today. When we witness the embarrassments, the humiliations, the talking down of these presidents, the dress downs, what are we looking at? Is this just an embarrassment or is there anything deeper in all this?
I really love that, Lynn, because the question that you're asking goes to the very heart of who we are as Africans and who we want to become. And I'm going to start my answer back in 2016. Back in 2016, there was a female Black American doctor flying in Delta Airline. Her name is Dr. Tamika Cross. Qualified like any other doctor. Absolutely amazing. Anybody who's been to medical school will tell you it is not a walk in the park. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. It is not easy at all. But Dr. Tamika had done it. She'd gone through medical school, and she was a fully qualified doctor, still is. Now, that time she was in Delta Airlines flying, and a passenger got an emergency. So imagine the plane is up there and somebody gets an emergency and they need instant treatment. They can't wait to get to the ground to get treated. This passenger needed to be treated immediately. And as they always do, the flight attendants asked, do we have any doctor on board? And of course, Dr. Tamika Cross put up her hand. Now, when she put up her hand, the flight attendant, who was white, told her that we are looking for an actual doctor or nurses. The flight attendant assumed that this Black lady cannot be a doctor, is not a doctor, didn't understand her question. And to the words that you used just now, is not enough. It's not enough to be a doctor. So when a white male doctor stepped forth, this white doctor was allowed to then do the treatment of this passenger. And that was absolutely shocking, absolutely demeaning. And here's what it did. This lady was in essence, the flight attendant was in essence telling Dr. Tamika Cross that you're this small. You're not enough, you're this small. You cannot be a doctor. How dare you claim to be a doctor? We're looking for a real doctor. And why I start with that is because it speaks to what happened with Cyril Ramaphosa. It speaks to a lot of other instances that we're going to discuss today. But it goes to the very heart of who we are as human beings, who we are as Africans, and the biases that we continue to live with as Africans or as Black people. The biases that we continue to live with. And here's the thing, Lynn. A lot of the white people do not even know that they have those biases. I do not think that this flight attendant was walking around feeling like I'm a racist person, But when push came to shove, when it was a moment that the stuff that is hidden in our subconscious has to come out, then it was very clear that this flight attendant had those biases. So I want Dr. Tamika Cross, if she ever watches this, to know that you're enough. Dr. Tamika Cross, you're enough, and 1.5 billion Africans, as a matter of fact, 2 billion Africans in the motherland and Africans in the diaspora are telling you that you're enough. You're more than enough.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of what we are doing, to change this narrative and begin to remind ourselves that we are enough.
Yeah, enough.
We are completely enough. And we, the African people, are actually the ones who are going to take this world to the next level. Because the African people already have innate solidarity, what we call Ubuntu.
Yes.
And because we have that, it is no wonder that a lot of people, irrespective of their races, when they visit Africa, they just feel a sense of belonging. They feel a sense of family.
Yeah.
You know, they feel like they're amongst human beings who still connect with each other.
Yeah.
So I needed to talk about Dr. Cross because it directly links to your question about what happened to Cyril Ramaphosa in that White House. Yeah.
Take us deeper. I would love to know what happened to Tamik later. Maybe that's something that we can be able to look up.
Yeah.
And I just want to echo what you've said. I can't imagine how she felt, knowing she's qualified. There's an opportunity here to save her life, and she was denied that based on color and based on the assumption that she's not enough. Africa,
Yes.
the president's man, again, someone who might never recover. It's Cyril Ramaphosa. I don't think he is likely to ever recover that. Even as I was watching his press conference after, when he was talking about the whole saga, you could tell that this is a humiliated man, right? Could you walk us through some of these scenarios?
Yeah.
And what is the hidden meaning? What is it that we don't get to see?
Absolutely.
When we are watching the humiliation, the embarrassment, that's all we will see. That's all we will talk about. What is the hidden truth in all this?
That's really, really powerful. There's a word you used there that really captures this, you know. It encapsulates what this is all about.
Yeah.
For those who are perpetrating this, the word humiliation. And I want everybody, before I go on, to try and think back to a time in your life when you were humiliated, however small others felt the humiliation was, or however big.
Yeah.
Dr. Cross, of course, was humiliated in front of an entire airplane. Now, I need everybody to just think back, maybe back in primary school or high school or university. Maybe the teacher told you that, how come you don't know the answer to this question? You know, whatever it is, maybe you went out and you had a fashion accident, you know, and you felt humiliated. Yeah, I just need people to think back to any instance when they're humiliated, because that particular humiliation, if it was not perpetrated by somebody else intentionally, it still didn't subtract from the shame that you felt and from the way that you felt. Now, if it was perpetrated by somebody, then it feels even worse. And now this will take me back to the colonial days, because we need to have a historical context of this so that we understand that we're not overreacting. We are not overreacting at all. We are actually addressing something that is very serious, that is like a cancerous tumor that has to stop. Because it has been perpetrated against Africans for the longest time. Now, if you look back at the colonial days, one of the things that used to happen, especially to African men, was being referred to as boy, very deliberately, so that you can understand that in the hierarchy, you as an African man, you are here, and the white man is here. And one way of doing that is to refer to you as boy when you're a full-grown man. Now, this brings me to something that I always celebrate, and it totally makes me emotional when I talk about this. It brings me to the great Patrice Lumumba, because Patrice Lumumba, for those people who may not be familiar with him, I hope there are not many, was Congo's first duly elected prime minister. And Patrice Lumumba was a courageous African king. He was a lion-hearted human being who didn't take no crap from nobody. Patrice Lumumba, on the day of independence, June 30th, 1960, he talked about what I've just told you about Africans being referred to as boys. The king of Belgium, Bedouin, he had just given a speech praising colonialism. And Patrice Lumumba was supposed to play along and clap his hands politely and say, "Thank you, master. You've now granted us colonialism. We are happy that you've done that. You know, we banged down before you." But Patrice Lumumba, at that tender age of 35 years old, was having none of that. And let me pause briefly there to again remind African youth that your age is not an excuse for inaction. Your age is not an excuse for inaction. Because this is a young fellow, 35 years old, even in today's world, you're legally still a young person.
Yeah.
You know, in Africa, once you're 36, then they can say that you're no longer, yeah. But Patrice Lumumba was still a youth, aged 35. The king of Belgium is seated right there. The king of Belgium has just praised his country, Belgium, and said that Belgium brought civilization to Congo. Now, Lynn, one of the greatest speeches that I urge everybody to read was then given by Patrice Lumumba. He pulled a fast one on them. They didn't know he was going to give this particular speech. He improvised this speech on that material day when he realized the way these people wanted to run that Independence Day celebration. So he stood up. Patrice Lumumba was very tall, and he loved to style his hair. He was very stylish, the Congolese.
Yes.
Very stylish in that dapper suit.
Yeah.
And then he stood up, and then he gave a very powerful speech. And I just want to reference one sentence that he said there. He said that the Belgium, the colonialists, were used to referring to us as boys, but he said it in the French way. In French, when I use the word "tu," for example, "to a belle, you're beautiful," there's familiarity. But when there's no familiarity, when there's, when it is just formal, I use the word vous,
Yes.
V-O-U-S. Now, they used to refer to the Congolese back then as "tu," not because there was intimacy or familiarity, but to remind them that they were lesser. Wow. To remind them that in the hierarchy, they were here, and the Belgium were here. And to the Belgium, you had to refer to them as vous. Wow. Meaning that you're regarding them as your seniors, as your formal masters. So Patrice Lumumba clearly said, you people have been forcing us to use "tu" when you are referring to you. When you're referring to us, you use "tu." But we black people, Congolese, we have to use "vous." He told them that is unacceptable. He told them that the Congolese have fought. They have shed their blood to gain independence. And he is saying this with the king seated right there. Now, I want everybody in your mind to juxtapose Patrice Lumumba with the king of Belgium, a mighty empire at that time. Juxtapose that.
Yes.
See Patrice Lumumba in one box. Now, next to the box, put Cyril Ramaphosa with the present day king of Belgium, a man who fancies himself as the king of America, a man who's made it clear that in fact he is a king. During his birthday, there's supposed to be a big military parade to honor him as the king of America. In fact, they should stop calling him President Donald Trump. They should just start calling him King Trump, because that's how he's behaving. So they should just drop the pretense. Let us know that Britain has King Charles, who is ceremonial, but America has King Trump. Let us just stop the pretense.
Yes.
Now, let people juxtapose that. Put it side by side.
Wow.
Look at one man whose country has just gotten independence, who is 35 years old. He is a youth. He's a young man. And the king of Belgium related to Leopold, present day, let me use the word certain. Yeah. Because Leopold killed millions of the Congolese.
Yes.
This guy has Leopold's blood running in him. He's king. And on this particular day, if ever there was a day when Lumumba was supposed to just play nice, after all, you have independence.
Yes.
Just play nice and the king will go back to Belgium and
Let
he can
it
go.
go.
Yeah. So, when you're looking at that, I hope then you can see Cyril Ramaphosa in Donald Trump's Oval Office in a different light. Because Lumumba could have been diplomatic, he could have let everything rest, but you and I would not be talking about him today.
Yes.
At all. The same way that Ramaphosa 50 years from now, and nobody who is going to be talking about that Oval Office in a positive light. History will not be kind to that. But history is kind to what Lumumba did, because when I talk about that, the reason I get emotional is it reminds me that I am enough as a black person. That even if I have Trump in front of me, even if I have King Charles in front of me, even if I have Keir Starmer in front of me, the Prime Minister of Britain, I am enough and they cannot belittle me. And I learned that from Lumumba.
Wow.
You see, it's so important for Africans to, from today, when the name Lumumba is mentioned, don't just remember that first king of the first prime minister of Congo. Don't just remember the fact he was assassinated, and we'll come to that as part of this whole thing of humiliation. But remember what he did that day. And may that remind every single African in this world to know that they're enough and nobody should ever, ever make them feel this small.
I appreciate you for that. That's one thing that has now been embedded in my heart.
Yeah.
I think every time I think as an African, and you are right, it makes someone a bit emotional because he had everything to lose.
Yes.
They could easily have said, we are not even giving you independence.
Yes, absolutely.
They could easily have killed him there and then.
Exactly.
But he stood firm.
Exactly.
We are enough.
And then now, what happens after that, Lynn, is again really, really important.
Yeah.
Because now the humiliation began. The humiliation began because the Belgium were pissed to the high heavens. The Westerners were pissed to the high heavens. So the humiliation began. Now, remember the Congolese army until that point had been led by the Belgium, not by the Congolese. So what happened is that the Belgium immediately, after a very short time, arranged for a mutiny of the Congolese army. That's when the junior officers rebel. It's not a coup d'etat, it's just the army rebelling against the senior officers.
Yes.
So there was a mutiny, and then as a result, the humiliation was doubled because Congo then, Belgium then sent 3,500 Belgium army to Congo. They had no right to do that. They did not do it under the UN or anything. They simply sent their own army to an independent, sovereign African nation. And that shows how they didn't even consider Congo to be a country. Because you cannot just send your army to the next country. You can't.
Yeah.
It is against all the laws of international diplomacy. But they didn't care because to them, Congo was this small. And that's exactly what we're talking about, humiliation. Now it became national humiliation. The same way that in that Oval Office, there was humiliation, not just for a son of Africa, not just for Cyril Ramaphosa, but for Africans, because he is our brother. He's totally is our brother. He's the son of Africa. So when that president is being humiliated and we're sharing or feeling that humiliation, that's now what the Belgium did. Now, let me pause at this point to explain one thing.
Yeah.
That humiliation, when it is intentionally perpetrated, it is meant to make you feel a lot smaller. It is meant to erode your self-worth so that you begin questioning the very essence of who you are. You begin asking yourself, am I in fact enough? You begin wondering if there's something wrong with you, which is why in a relationship, if I may be Dr. Love for a minute.
Oh, talk to your fans.
Exactly. Yeah. When your partner, when your girlfriend or boyfriend or husband
Yes.
or wife makes you feel small intentionally.
Yeah.
Because I know sometimes we may individually have problems where, you have inferiority complex that has nothing to do with your partner. But when they intentionally begin to make you feel small, and you begin questioning yourself that, am I good enough for this person? And you begin going the extra mile to prove that in fact you're worthy. Because it happens a lot in relationships. You want to prove that you're worthy to this person. So you keep going that extra mile, not out of love, but to show them that you're enough for them, that you're good enough for them. But as everybody who's ever tried to do that will tell you, it's never enough. It's never enough because the more you grovel, the more you try to show that I'm good enough for you, the more they take you for granted. And then now they begin to use that to manipulate you, to dominate you, to subjugate you. And that's exactly what the United States of America has been doing for a long time, what Europe has been doing for a long time. When they humiliate us, it is not just because they are just trying to be the bad guy, but it has the direct goal of trying to dominate us, to subjugate us. Because when they have control over us, during the colonial days, they had direct political control. Now they don't. The only way they can now have control is through such massive humiliation. And that's what now began to happen in Congo, because you have 3,500 soldiers from the Belgian army sent to Congo, supposedly to protect Belgian interests in Congo. Now, a short while after that, a very short while after that, Patrice Lumumba, who was as strategic as they come, even at that young age, he proved that you do not have to be old to be wise and to be strategic. He decided, I'm going to go to the US in July. They get independence June 30th. Less than a month later, he decides that I'm going to go to see Dwight Eisenhower, the President of the United States of America, because he was cognizant of the fact that the Cold War was going to destroy Congo, as it later did. So he wanted to start with the United States of America to reassure them that he is not a puppet of the Soviets. Because he was not a puppet of the Soviets, but they were looking at him as a puppet of the Soviets. So he wanted to reassure America so that they do not direct all their military power and diplomatic energies on his young country, and in so doing destroy it. So when he arrived in America, he was met in the airport by the Secretary of State, a guy called Christian Head. Even the name will show you that indeed he was a very hateful fellow.
Person.
Yeah. Now, the sad thing, and now the humiliation continues here. Because remember, we said that we would like people to see that there's a pattern of humiliation. There's a pattern that beneath the embarrassment is a goal to humiliate you. Beneath the target of humiliating you is a target of dominating you, controlling you, manipulating you. So what do? He is here, Patrice Lumumba. He lands in Washington. He's even carried an ivory lamb as a present for the President of America, because that's what Africans do. We are very hospitable people. Gifting is not alien. It's something that is,
in us.
It's just in us. I remember my first time in Europe being very surprised when I went into a house. I visited a friend's house, and I thought it would be like it is back home, where a visitor is feted and celebrated, and when you're offered food, you have no option of saying no. As a visitor, when you say no, you have to explain, I've just eaten and all that, because we are just hospitable to visitors like that. But then there they asked me, if I would like some water. Yeah. Because for me, water is a given.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What you asked me if I want,
Yes.
do you want some chicken?
Yeah, good. Or some beef.
Yeah.
Or what?
Exactly. Yeah. But they asked me if I want water. And I began to learn that it's different. This hospitality is different. For them, it is extremely normal.
Yes.
In some European countries, let me warn Africans who have not gone there, you only get fast servings. You know how for us, you eat until you're tired.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the tea,
yeah.
There's the meal, then there's some bananas, some mangoes.
Exactly. It's just one serving, and that's about it. But that's their culture. It's who they are.
Yes.
I'm not taking away their
From
humanity, but I'm just explaining the hospitality of Africans.
Yeah.
The same hospitality that drove the great Patrice Lumumba to carry an ivory lamp, beautiful ivory lamp, and a couple of other sculptures for President Dwight Eisenhower. And then, what does Eisenhower do? He decides to say that he cannot meet Lumumba.
Wow.
He's too busy. What was he too busy doing? He had to go to the Republican National Convention, something that he's got a freaking Air Force One, for God's sake. He can meet Lumumba, go 1 hour later, and he'll not be late. He's a president. They'll wait for him. But he says he cannot meet Lumumba because they have already decided that this young African premier, this young African leader, is not worth my time. It's totally not worth my time. And we then got to learn what exactly they were feeling and the plans that they wanted to put in place through the CIA director.
Yeah.
The CIA director at the time, a pipe-smoking fellow called Lynn, he then said that Lumumba is worse than Castro, Fidel Castro, who was already a mortal enemy of America at the time. So for anybody to say from an American standpoint that you're worse than Fidel Castro, they are literally saying that there's the devil, then there's you.
Yes.
Because that was their thinking at the time, to a large extent even now. So how on earth would the president meet somebody who is next to the devil? He can't. The optics cannot allow it. The presidency cannot allow that to happen. So he didn't meet him. Just didn't meet him at all. The only person that, purely because of diplomacy, they allowed Lumumba to meet was this Secretary of State who met him at the airport. Lumumba had about a 2 to 3 hour meeting with him and other State Department officials, and they were shocked. They were completely shocked. And when I tell you now why they were shocked, you'll see how their humiliation and their belittling of Lumumba and Africans was very much at play. They were shocked, Lynn, because they thought that Lumumba is somebody who is not even articulate, who cannot even explain himself because he's a puppet of the Soviets. He's just this young African who somehow was elected prime minister, but he will not be able to string together logical arguments and reasonings.
How dare he?
Yeah. But they were shocked because Lumumba, for that time, for those 2 hours, explained from A to Z about what the Belgians were doing in Congo, about how the independence was being undermined. He explained his side of the story. He took back. He seized his story. Imagine, Lynn, if you don't have control over your story. If it is society that is saying your story on your behalf, you lose a lot of power when that happens. The closest I can get to explaining that is, how sometimes the so-called celebrities, because people know that they sell newspapers, they sell a lot of, media, when they claim that celebrity XYZ is sleeping with so-and-so, but it's not true. Now, imagine when that becomes accepted as a truth. It's one of the problems that these people who are a little bit more famous then start facing. that you're just not in control of your story, of the narrative at all. But it is more insidious. It is more, unacceptable when it is totally deliberate. You don't own control of your narrative, but whoever is controlling that narrative is making it appear directly distorting the reality for their own benefits, using humiliation, using a couple of other tools. Lumumba corrected that day to the US Secretary of State, and he was able to own the Congolese story and to explain to the Americans what exactly is happening.
Yes.
And then they decided to humiliate him further because he told them that we need the United States of America to step up. You people say that you don't support colonialists. Now you need to step up. Provide, let us have an arrangement of getting a plane that I can use to fly around in my country. Because remember, Congo is a very young country. Yeah. It doesn't even have a plane. And Congo is as big as it gets. One of the biggest countries in Africa. Now, they rebuffed him, told him that they can't do that. He should talk to the UN. Everything that he requested from the Secretary of State, they rebuffed him and just referred him to the UN. Lumumba, still being very strategic, in a press conference at Blair House later on, he then said that the United States of America should at least then send their army so that there can be some equilibrium there. For now, it is just the Belgium who are there. But again, they rebuffed him. And when he said that, he also wanted to tactfully show them that the Russians are not controlling me. The Soviets are not controlling me. I would not be asking you to send an army.
If they were.
Yeah, if they were controlling me. But they totally rebuffed him. Now, what he didn't know, Lynn, is that they had already put in place the ultimate humiliation for him. They had already put in place the ultimate humiliation that we will get to in the next 5 minutes. So his trip to America was not really fruitful because he didn't get much of what he came to seek from the Americans. However, he went to Howard University, a historically black university. Yes. And then he tried to pitch to them that Congo really needs doctors, professionals, and all those people because Belgium had made sure, Lynn, that the Congolese don't get higher education.
No infrastructure, no education, no nothing.
Absolutely nothing, and yet they're in control of the country. But they made sure that never ever happened. Now, Lumumba said he was not just going to sit there. I'll go to my fellow black people. You see, he understood the black solidarity is important, extremely important. Allow me to pause briefly there to explain. I know there's some people who don't like the reference of the term black because it is true that it was a construct of racists who wanted to completely delineate and categorize the races, for their own selfish and racist ends. Hence, white, black, brown. So some people are of the school of thought that they don't like that term, and I respect that. But I also respect those who say that we own it, we completely own it. It's a way of showing them the middle finger.
Black and proud.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it's important for that to be out there so that even if you're of the school of thought that we shouldn't use the term black, hopefully you can respect the fact that when we use it, we are not giving in to those racist categorizations.
Yes.
We are simply taking back what is ours.
I think for me, it's ownership. It's pride. I'm black, so what?
Yeah, deal with it.
Yeah, because...
Exactly. Yeah, so Lumumba said, I'm going to go to my fellow blacks. Yes. He understood that solidarity. He understood black consciousness. Yeah. Notice that the Americans are humiliating him every step of the way. But just like he stood tall on June 30th, when he told the king of Belgium, the truth in that Independence Day speech, he is not cowering. His shoulders are not drooping. His eyes are not closing. The more they humiliate him, the more he looks for other solutions. And that's why he went to Howard University. And while at Howard University, he was able to really pitch to them that we need some black solidarity here. We need you people to come to Congo, because we need these professionals. This is a man who had the vision of Congo in his mind. He had a very clear vision of what Congo should be, of what Africa should be. However, they rebuffed him, so he goes back home. Now it brings me to that ultimate humiliation that Patrice Lumumba ended up facing, that I hope will really show people that you cannot ignore humiliation when it happens to the African race. You cannot wish it away because it is a tool. You need to look at it in the same breath that you look at those nuclear weapons that can destroy, that can really, really destroy. Nobody jokes about with that. Nobody would say if Kim Jong-un or any of those nuclear powers are playing around with their nuclear, nobody would just sit there and say, let them be, just be diplomatic. The world would mobilize and say, we cannot allow Pakistan or India or America or Russia to play around because nuclear weapons can kill hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions. So people should regard the direct, deliberate, intentional humiliation of Africans with the same seriousness. Because it plants seeds that entire generations of Africans grow up feeling belittled, like they're not enough, and that's not acceptable. So what they then did to Patrice Lumumba, that I hope will give people that fierce urgency of knowing that you cannot take any humiliation that is given to you as a black person. You cannot take it lying down. You just cannot, and you must not. What happened is that the machinations of the Central Intelligence Agency, America's CIA, they began rolling. Those wheels began rolling, in cahoots with Belgium. Eventually, they did what they always do, divide and rule, find somebody within Africa who can be used now as a puppet to destroy, like a virus. A virus lives in your body and it's eating you up. It's just eating you up. So they found Mobutu Sese Seko and his cronies. At the time, he was called Joseph Mobutu. And then they ensured that Mobutu was able to work very closely with other betrayers, so that they then arrested Patrice Lumumba. The Belgians at that time were in direct control of that, together with the Americans. Otherwise, they could have stopped it. If they wanted, they could have stopped it. But instead, they were instigating it, ensuring that it happens. Now, it is one thing, Lynn, to arrest somebody, like they have now arrested in Tanzania, Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader. But it is another thing when you're arresting somebody with the direct goal of killing this person, taking out their lives. It's a totally other thing, and it is as evil as it gets. It is the worst form of subjugation and domination, because you want to dominate somebody so much that the only thing you can do is to take out their lives. And that is unacceptable. After arresting Patrice Lumumba, there are photos all over the internet of now the desire to shame him in public, humiliate him. We're going back to that word. So that people can understand that when African presidents are humiliated, when Africans themselves, and I'll give instances of when Africans themselves are humiliated. I already shared about Dr. Tamika Cross. When that humiliation is taking place, it is always a pattern, a systematic pattern with the goal of dominating and controlling, and that cannot be allowed to happen. So they humiliated Patrice Lumumba. They tied his hands, they roughed him up. There's videos and photos of him alighting from a plane when they took him to Katanga, a part of Congo that had seceded with the help of the Belgium. It had seceded because it had a lot of minerals, and they wanted to use that region to just destabilize Congo completely. So that even if Lumumba had remained as leader, he wouldn't be in control of that. Then they used a guy called Moise Tshombe, the supposed president of this breakaway part of Congo. Then they took Lumumba there. because they knew that if they didn't take him to Katanga, the Congolese people who loved Lumumba, who adored Lumumba, would actually rise up in arms and save him. They knew that that would happen. The only way was to take him to this hostile region. And there's footage of him alighting, descending from the plane, and then they took him to some isolated place, and then they killed him. A whole elected leader of Africa, and Africa cannot let it rest, must not let it rest completely. Now, it is one thing to kill somebody, but they went a step further to show you how humiliation and the hatred that leads to that has no limits. That's why we have to stop it. It has no limits. If the person humiliating you knows that they have succeeded, they keep doing it over and over and over again. So even after killing Lumumba, the Belgians, you know what they did, Lynn? They were like, okay, this man was a great leader of Africa. If people know that he was buried here, it will become a shrine. It will still lead to an uprising. Do you see how even in death, he's still conquering these people? That's a spirit that Africa needs, to realize you cannot be defeated by anybody completely. Because even in death, he's still scaring them completely. Now, they are like, okay, what should we then do? We will melt his body, dissolve his body with chemical, so that there's no body to bury in the first place. Then they ended up doing that. And when they did that, what happened is that only a tooth was saved. It came back to Congo a couple of years ago. But the rest of his body was dissolved so that there's nothing to bury. That sort of humiliation knows no limits, and Africans cannot and must not allow that to keep happening, because it is still happening. Now, one more thing to capture about that particular bit before we move on to other aspects of humiliation, still regarding Lumumba and Congo, and then other African presidents and ordinary Africans. One more thing to capture there is this. Justice doesn't have an expiry date. Justice is not like that foodstuff on the shelf that you're going to read that expiry date, June 26, 2025. Justice does not have an expiry date. So there has to be justice. There has to be justice for Lumumba, because unless we have that, we cannot proceed. We cannot proceed at all. And they keep repeating those injustices over and over again.
And as two things, as they are doing that, they're instilling fear. Any other young person that thinks, they can be the next Patrice Lumumba, all you think about is your body being dissolved and your family, just getting to remember you through a tooth that is not even in your own country, that gets to be returned to your country later on. And then another lesson that maybe I'm picking from this, they don't use themselves to humiliate you. They use another black person to humiliate. And the funny thing is, when Ramaphosa was going through all this, they used him and his delegation to humiliate Malema. Right? So they are putting him at the center where he can neither defend or support Malema. He can't say anything. So now the interpretation to the African mind is, even Ramaphosa hates Malema. Malema hates Ramaphosa. So now they make it our war, but by design, they already know what they want to achieve through this whole divide and rule. You are looking at Patrice, you are looking at Mobutu, and you're like, they have to also make sure they are using one of you to humiliate and embarrass another. A very hard lesson we needed to learn on Patrice Lumumba. How does, before we go maybe to the other African leaders, I love what you said, justice. There has to be justice when it comes to this. How does that justice look like to you?
This justice must be a complete public inquiry, televised live, completely public, every second of it. And everything that I've just said must then be repeated. There must be the living witnesses. Lumumba's family, the
Yeah.
Congolese were there.
Yeah.
The Belgium, many of them, of course, have died, but some of them before they die, like the police chief who oversaw, a guy called Soete, who oversaw that particular dissolving of
Yes.
Lumumba's body,
Yes.
who even is the one who ended up with that tooth that was retrieved from his house, from his daughter. They have to speak out. Their records have to come out. And this public inquiry must be led by a credible international body, whether it is ICJ, International Court of Justice, whether it is ICC. And I'll show you how even in some of these bodies, there's
Yes.
still humiliation of Africans going on. But it must be led by one of these credible international bodies, even if it is the UN itself. But the most obvious would be those two. And then it has to be done completely above board.
Yeah.
So that when the verdict that we all know is guilty is meted out, then there has to be the biggest compensation ever in the history of humanity must then be given to the people of Congo.
Yeah.
For me, we are talking billions and billions of dollars,
Billions.
both from Belgium and from USA. Of course, that will not bring back Patrice Lumumba,
Yes.
but it will begin to show that you cannot get away with these things. Now, related to that, Lynn, is another injustice on top of that injustice that we have to address within this context.
Go on.
The year is 2002. Belgium finally accepts that they had a responsibility, but then they are just trying to whitewash, because what they did then in 2002 is Belgium simply said, that some officials in the Belgian government at the time had moral responsibility and had some responsibility in Lumumba's death. Now, any legal scholar or any lawyer will tell you that they have not accepted, they have not unreservedly apologized and taken responsibility. That was purely about whitewashing, because now the present day government in Belgium is supposedly, of course, not like the other government, or so they want us to think, but the only proof they can give us is to unreservedly apologize. And then whatever verdict is given out, which will be guilty, they have to be ready to pay whatever billions and billions of dollars. Then we can begin to say, okay, hopefully they are learning a little bit and they're different. Now, when they give those quarter apologies, it's not even half apology. For me, it is just a small fraction of apology. It is more humiliation. It is more humiliation, because it is like somebody hitting you in the face and clearly injuring you, and then saying that if I injured you a little bit, then I'm sorry. You know, it is just adding insult to injury, which is what they do with these quarter apologies of theirs. The same thing that France did when Macron went to Rwanda, and then he also gave a quarter apology, you know, by using seemingly strong words, you know, saying that France regrets the role that it played in the Rwandan genocide. You know, it is so important on that point for people to understand that we must never ever now as Africans belittle the tragedies that have been meted out on Africa. And that, of course, includes the Rwandan genocide, because I understand that currently, because of the geopolitics and because of the issues around Paul Kagame and M23 that people rightfully point out, sometimes people are so angry with that they begin to look at that genocide as something that is then lesser. You know, they begin to say that, yes, there was a genocide, but also X number of Congolese, millions of Congolese have died. We cannot belittle any of those, because all these, from the Congolese to the Rwandans who were killed, are fellow Africans, innocent civilians, who should never be caught in between their leaders' sins or malpractices. You know, they should never ever be caught with that, because if we ever belittle the things that we go through as Africans, then we are simply joining them in humiliating ourselves, in making ourselves small. So anyway, so Macron did that. He gave that quote apology, the same way that Germany gave a quote apology of the genocide in Namibia in the early part of the 20th century. And these quote apologies are also other forms of humiliations, other forms of embarrassments. They also seek. Now, those ones are very clever. They're about manipulation.
Not humiliation, manipulation.
Exactly.
We are advancing.
Manipulation is very sneaky.
Very.
It's very, very sneaky. And people who excel in manipulation are some of the most dangerous people. Again, if I go back to my Dr. Love case, in a relationship, when there's manipulation, it is extremely dangerous because you'd rather know that there are obvious problems that we can't deal with, and if we can't, we can walk away. But when there's manipulation, it is no wonder that sometimes people ask, and how on earth did she stay in that relationship for that long? Yeah, because of such manipulation. And it speaks to why Africa is still in a relationship with Belgium for this long. Because when you understand some of these things I'm sharing about Lumumba, you can wonder why do we even have ambassadors in both countries? It is now because of that kind of manipulation. And this manipulation is usually fed and informed by these quote apologies, by these fake diplomatic entreaties. And again, that is why what happened with Donald Trump in that office is very dangerous, because you'd rather be like Cuba and know that we have no relationship with the United States of America than to have a relationship that is very parasitic, that is very toxic, that only helps the Americans when they have military bases in Africa and we have no military bases in the United States of America. They would never, ever. It would be a cold day in hell before they allow any African country to say, now we are setting up a military base here. But I actually dare African presidents. Ramaphosa, one of the ways you begin redeeming yourself is to tell America with all seriousness that South Africa wants to set up a military base in America. Yeah, just tell him that. Because at least you will start salvaging a little bit of this relationship. But I don't want that point to be lost, that currently the manipulation between the West and Africa is at a whole other level. Books and books can be written on this manipulation, because the current diplomatic relationships we have masquerade as healthy relationships, but they are in fact toxic relationships. And the proof of that is the fact that half of people in sub-Saharan Africa are today, as you and I speak, living in abject poverty, in multidimensional poverty. Half of Africans, we're talking 600 million plus, sub-Saharan Africa. Yet, the West has been giving all that aid, yet we have had these seemingly healthy relationships. But Africa is no better off.
We are not progressing.
Yeah, we're not progressing at all. Of course, we have to, before we conclude the show at the tail end of this, then look at the solutions. Because as we've been saying, we must always then say, okay, this is where we're being messed up. This is where we're being messed up. But these are the solutions. And we are the ones who are powerful enough to tackle these solutions.
Love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Manipulation, humiliation, toxicity, narcissistic behaviors, left, right, and center.
Absolutely.
Something clicked when you said they say we have very great relationships. And the aid in Africa, the UN bases, and all these things that they say, we are doing for Africa. But DJ.
And it's nothing like that. And it also applies to, in this period of manipulation, they always make sure that there's a certain percentage that is in fact very healthy.
Yes.
Yeah. For example, the US support towards HIV drugs
Yes.
in Africa,
Yeah.
you know, the truth is that it really helped millions and millions of people. But when you're looking at that, you cannot isolate it from the broader harm of this toxic relationship.
Yes.
So it is up to us Africans to, by the way, never even say no to some of those things they're doing, because for me, they are simply giving us back what belongs to us. You know, what they have taken is so much, and sometimes they give back a little bit.
Yeah.
So we should in fact get them to give back a lot more. You see. Now, what I want to say in relation to this also is, when you're looking at Russia and China, the International Criminal Court, I also want to talk about the humiliation that comes from those quarters together with the United Nations, because we have to understand that these things are multi-pronged, and we cannot focus only on the USA or on the West as if these others are also not doing this. We have to also bring that out and also show how to avoid that and how to turn the tables. So if I start with Russia, 2023, African presidents, again, good old Ramaphosa was in the mix. Together with a president of Senegal, of Comoros. The president of Comoros at the time was the chairman of the African Union. So a couple of these presidents, including Museveni, they went to Russia, St. Petersburg. They were there to help, you know, to bring peace, to broker peace. And I remember at the time cheering and saying, oh, that's a good thing. For once, Africa is the one trying to bring peace between these European powers.
Yes.
But then, what happened to them in St. Petersburg was also another form of humiliation, but now from Vladimir Putin. Now, let me again challenge everybody to go and read or watch for themselves, because as I said in a previous episode, sometimes we have a problem of elevating certain people to semi-god status, so that if anybody speaks anything that is deemed as negative, then you're automatically anti-West or anti-this, or pro-West rather, or pro-this. But I will always say that we are pro-Africa. You know, we are just pro-Africa. Anybody who is helping Africa to advance is our friend. The moment they stop doing that, or the moment they fall short, we have to call them out so that they fall back in line. So what happened in that scenario was that Comoros and South Africa and Senegal had already started giving a presentation. They had a 10-point agenda written by experts, you know, and love him or hate him, Ramaphosa can be very diplomatic and articulate, you know, a smooth-talking fellow.
He is.
You know, he was even Mandela's chief negotiator back in the day, because he's very good in that, you know, that suave sort of speaking. So he had already used that good English of his and good way of speaking to begin telling Putin, you know, why there should be peace between Ukraine and Russia and what Russia should do. The Comoros president had already done the same. The Senegalese one had done the same. But there were still other presidents. You know, it was still Africa's time to make the presentation, and then Putin would respond. But what Putin did is, after those three countries spoke, he cut them short. He just cut them short, you know, mid-sentence, and then he told them that they are misguided, you know, completely misguided. Putin didn't care that maybe let me let them finish.
Then
and
we come back to then I ask a few questions.
Exactly.
Yes.
He just cut them short. In other words, you guys have nothing more to tell me. And these are presidents of sovereign nations who have used their taxpayers, you know, Ramaphosa.
But DJ,
DJ,
I think me and you were on a different thought when it comes to that trip, you know. Personally, I was watching it, and the first thing I asked myself, who sent you? Man, these people will be facing humiliation,
left, right,
and center, being put in a bus like school children. like people in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And at the back of my mind, I'm like, man, who sent you? You
Yeah.
know? So
Because now they
I
are
don't know,
there.
I don't know how to feel
Yeah.
when Putin, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
decides to tell them you are
Put them in
misguided.
their place.
Because for me, it's very critical.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
the part. Tell me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
There's key issues in Africa
yeah.
that these people can't even
should be
come
addressing.
together and
Yeah.
solve.
Yeah.
They will not solve why I need a visa to this country.
Yeah.
They will not solve why flights are so expensive to go to this country. They
Yeah.
will not sit down as presidents and ask, why do we have
solve
borders
that. Yeah.
in our own continent? What are these
Yeah.
borders? What do they mean?
Yeah.
But they will go
To Russia, St.
and
Petersburg.
and say
Spend
how
our money.
I'm not saying they're
Yeah.
experts. We are very
Yeah.
intelligent. Africans, we are very intelligent.
Yeah.
I know we have solutions for even people outside Africa.
Yeah.
Hey, but
Yeah.
Bane, solve your own issues
Yeah.
first here,
Before
you know.
go globetrotting.
And that is why
Yeah.
even Putin be looking at them like, you guys, you still have jiggers in your country.
Yeah.
What are you telling me?
Yeah.
It is very hard
Yeah.
for someone to take your advice if it doesn't reflect the actions in your own country. It will be very hard for you to tell me how I should run my own country. If when I look at your country, I see division, I see corruption, I see people who are not focused, I see presidents building paradise, I see people talking about the budget they need to renovate State House.
Yeah.
It is very hard
Yeah.
for me to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
For real, DJ. For real. That is one I will say.
Yeah.
When they get humiliated, let them
Yeah.
humiliate you all they can. Because
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
are you there?
Yeah.
But go on, DJ.
Yeah.
That was my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but I totally see where you're coming from. And you know, there are those who are also saying
Yeah.
that why did Ramaphosa go to the Oval Office in the first place?
Yes.
But my take is that if you have then gone there and you know you have a responsibility as an African leader, then for God's sake, don't let Africa down. Because now you're already there anyway.
Oh, you went already.
Yeah, you took yourself there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but back to Russia.
Yes.
You see, I'm going to link this to a guy called Emperor Bokassa,
Go on.
Central African Republic, because you see, sometimes this humiliation is very, very deliberate, extremely deliberate. For example, let's say that you have beef with me. Maybe you and I are running for office somewhere, but you want the world to see that I am not worthy to occupy that seat because I don't have certain etiquette.
Yes.
And you know very well that as a, as an African man who is very authentic, I love using my hands to eat. I don't have to prove nothing to nobody.
Yeah.
But the positions we are both seeking require some etiquette when it comes to handling culinary and stuff. So if you have a goal to ensure that I show up in a dinner somewhere and use my hands so that you can show how much of a buffoon I am,
Yes.
then that is manipulation.
True.
Yes, you've gotten one over me, but the point is that you've manipulated the situation very expertly.
To your own advantage.
Exactly. So in this scenario, of course, Putin knew that these people, number one, have nothing to listen. If I'm not listening to America, I will not even listen to them, But let me score 2 victories here. Number one,
Go on.
let me appear like, unlike America and these other people, I am willing to give these Africans a chance to bring us peace. Number 2, I will then humiliate them after they come, so that after I do that, it becomes clear that there's nothing really they can do.
Yes.
You see, why I'm linking that to Emperor Bokassa is France did the same thing with the Central African Republic in 1976, when Emperor Bokassa, at the time he was just President Bokassa, but that was not enough. He needed to look bigger and bigger. So he was like, okay, I need to be called emperor and I need to have coronation.
Yes.
The whole thing was going to cost $20 million. In today's money, it's about $100 million. And President Bokassa then sought the help of France. The president of France was a guy called Valéry, who gave so much money to Emperor Bokassa and even attended the coronation. And the express goal was manipulation. They just wanted this guy to look like a buffoon, you know, and by extension, other African leaders to look like buffoons, to ridicule them.
Yes.
So that on the one hand, you appear to be supporting, but you're not really supporting. You're just setting up these people for failure. Because to date, Emperor Bokassa is regarded as one of the worst autocrats, but also one of the craziest buffoons to date. And that France expertly pulled it off. They expertly pulled it off because that's the goal they had. You know, I previously talked about France Afrique, this insidious, secretive thing to just destabilize Africa so that you benefit from Africa. So in this scenario, it is important for African presidents to understand and for Africans to pressurize their leaders to tell them they cannot, as you've said, put themselves in positions where they invite that to happen to them. Because yes, they had it coming, but the problem is, you can imagine today in Russia, because immediately after Putin interjected, the live TV was called off. So if there are people in today's Russia who now look at African presidents as completely clueless, you see the extent that to you and I, and that perpetuates the racism, that perpetuates the humiliation, because it's so easy for you to show up in Moscow tomorrow and for you to then be linked to the fact that your president, you know, was completely clueless. So by extension, you too, you're clueless. You see, these kinds of games, we should not allow anybody to play them with us as Africans, whether it is Russia or America. In the case of China, Lynn, there's this forum on Chinese and Africa that takes place occasionally. In 2018, there was a similar forum, and you should have seen how most African presidents, of course, went. But then the arrangement, the sitting arrangement, was such that Xi Jinping, the president of China, was like at the very center of it, with these Africans seated in a subordinate manner to him, so that any observer would be able to see that all these heads of state of Africa have not only just gone to China like they like doing to all these countries, but even the sitting arrangement, it's like students and their principal. And these are the kinds of narratives that then become very humiliating, and then they keep perpetuating a narrative of Africa as a lesser place. Because you have all these presidents. In their countries, they are the highest form of VIPs you'll ever get. There is no other bigger VIP than these presidents. But in China, they are now school children.
Boys.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. They have been reduced to boys in China. Of course, one can make the argument that, come on, DJ, be real. Eh? China's gross domestic product is $18 trillion. Africa's $3 trillion. So of course, you're not the same. But that is completely wrong, or a wrong way of looking at it. Because what measures human worth is not GDP. You are not any more important than me because you have more or less money than me. So this notion that just because China has more money, they are somehow more special or bigger than Africa, we also have to start killing that completely. Because then all these Africans go through life from generation to generation to generation, looking at themselves as lesser just because their GDP doesn't measure up, you see. So in that scenario, you cannot excuse the degrading of these African leaders to boy status just because they're in a richer country, because that's another form of clever humiliation. But that is more manipulation, diplomatic manipulation, because they might say it's just sitting arrangement, The same way in September 2022, when they put those African presidents in a bus,
Yes.
they also said it's just for logistical purposes. But guess what, Lynn? Joe Biden and the European leaders, them, they were not put in a bus.
Like DJ, that one we are not recovering.
Yeah. Yeah.
How that one?
Yeah.
Hey, that was bad.
Yeah.
That was bad.
It is not logistical.
I was like, you should have come for my chopper. I would have given you my chopper.
Exactly.
Man.
To go and use it.
That was so bad.
Yeah.
You know.
Because if we had seen Joe Biden seated next to William Ruto in that bus,
we would be okay.
Yeah,
We would
okay,
be
it was
okay.
logistics.
But you see also
Yeah.
the ability to not say to say no.
Yes.
If you put me in a bus,
Yeah.
it's not me, the president, you are putting in a bus. It's an
Yeah.
entire country you are putting in a bus.
Yeah.
How these people don't even know how to say no.
Exactly.
I mean, you are like 4 or 5 presidents and you can't say we are not riding in
Yeah,
this
you
bus.
just play along.
No, man,
Yeah.
a bit of ego here and there.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I
Exactly.
can't ride there.
Yeah.
Get me a chopper.
Yeah.
But because you don't know your worth,
Exactly.
And
it
you-
goes back to that.
the difference between them and Patrice
Yeah.
is Patrice knew his worth.
Exactly.
He died because he knew his worth.
Exactly.
These other ones, you don't know your worth. You don't know when to say no.
Yeah.
The media is right there with their cameras because
Yeah.
this is also something that helps push the narrative.
Yeah.
We have the photos. That's why we can't forget the incident in the bus.
Exactly.
That's why we can't forget
Yeah.
Ramaphosa in
Yeah.
the Oval
Ever.
Office. Because
Yeah.
the Western media has also captured this very nicely.
Exactly.
For people to be able to use, that's now how the narrative will be told.
Yeah.
African presidents were humiliated.
Yeah.
They were put in a bus
Uh-huh.
instead of
Uh-huh.
when African presidents were to be put in a bus, they said no. They said
And
no.
that would have been super powerful.
That would have been a very super
Yeah.
powerful way of
Yeah.
presenting this.
I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah,
I
but-
totally agree.
Yes, majority
Yeah.
of them get what they deserve. You know.
Yeah.
Even here alone, they can't ride in a bus, but in there you want to ride in
Yeah.
a bus.
They're happy doing that.
You're happy doing that. Yeah, but let's go on, DJ.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
go
now,
on.
you see, in the case of Britain,
Yeah.
in the case of Russia, in
Yes.
the case of China, you still see a subtle but deliberate effort to continue the domination through this diplomatic manipulation
Yeah.
that is in a gray area. On the one hand, you can't equate it. You can't equate Putin cutting this president's
Yes.
mid-sentence to Donald Trump specifically giving Ramaphosa a dressing down.
Yeah.
You know, you can say that maybe one is weightier than the other. But the point is that in both cases, in all those cases, there's still one power directly manipulating another power, either overtly or in a very subtle manner.
Yeah.
And our lesson as Africans is that at a national level, as you've just rightfully said, we cannot be yes men and yes women. We cannot be yes nations, you know, that when they say jump, we jump, sit, we sit, sit in the
Yes.
bus, literally we are sitting in the bus, you know, come to St. Petersburg and help broker peace. We're on the next plane, spending $100,000 per president, you know, money that could build a couple of roads, going there. So when you dance to my tune, Lynn, I'm controlling you. Because when I go faster, you're dancing faster, faster. When I'm going a bit slower, now you have to.
Yeah.
But the point is I'm controlling you.
You are.
You see? And that is the goal of all these different shades of humiliation. Folks should understand that there are many different shades of humiliation, but it is still humiliation.
It is still humiliation.
Whether it is a dark shade or a light shade or something in between, it is still humiliation.
Yeah.
And the goal is to control, which is why all those people are still controlling you. Before I touch on ICC and the UN, let me say another way that Russia must stop manipulating and controlling Africa. You see, I've previously talked of the WANA group. The WANA group that currently is calling itself the Africa Corps.
Yeah.
the leader of the Wana group was a guy called Yevgeny Prigozhin. Yevgeny Prigozhin died in a plane crash, and a lot of people pointed to Putin because a few months earlier, Yevgeny Prigozhin had led the same Wana group. They were marching towards Moscow. They wanted to stage a coup d'etat. It's like Putin had created a monster that was now turning against him. So somehow, Putin ensured that they didn't get to Moscow, pretended that, he was now friendly to Yevgeny Prigozhin, didn't even arrest him. But then a short while later, he died in that plane crash. I explained that for people to understand that these may be mercenaries, but they're still under the influence and control of the Russian government. Because the Russian government was able to take out Yevgeny Prigozhin. Of course, they're in control. Only that it's a clever way of never taking responsibility for what these people do. If it's the official Russian army in Africa, Central African Republic, Mali, then there can be repercussions if they kill people, if they mess up the country. But using mercenaries, again, now boils to a desire to dominate, a desire to subjugate. People may quickly be very quick to say that these presidents, they call in this Africa Corps or Wana group to protect them temporarily as they put their army in order. But it's not true. It's not true at all, because the Wana group in Sudan then teamed up with the Rapid Support Forces. And we all know that the Rapid Support Forces is perpetrating a genocide in Sudan. In Central African Republic and Mali, they have killed hundreds of people in the name of fighting alongside the local state armies. So my point there is this, that if you allow mercenaries that are under your influence or control to wreak havoc in Africa, that is not right. It is not right. Again, the argument may be made that it is these presidents who are allowing it to happen, and it is true. They bear the bigger responsibility. But all we are saying is, Russia, because you're a friend of Africa, because you never colonized Africa, because you relate with Africa respectfully, Russia, can you then take away these mercenaries? Because you can see what they have done in Sudan. You can see what they have done in Central African Republic.
What are you waiting for?
They need to get the hell out of there. They shouldn't be in these countries. And Burkina Faso, again, is a good case study here. Because the Wana group of Africa Corps is not there. It's not there at all. The Russian army, there is the few military experts that are there are purely for training purposes. Because Burkina Faso buys arms from Russia. The same way there are Chinese experts there, Turkish experts for training purposes. So, if Ibrahim Traoré understands that you cannot outsource your own security as a nation to a foreign power, then hopefully these other African countries will also follow suit and tell Russia, thanks but no thanks, it's time for these people to leave. Because honestly, it's another form of humiliation. I cannot come to your house, Lynn, and in the name of protecting you, begin living with you in your house. I can't do that,
so
man.
Disrespectful. Stay at the gate.
Exactly. If it's about protecting you. So we have to call out Russia on that. And then regarding ICC, the International Criminal Court, for the longest time, for a couple of years, the International Criminal Court was focusing mostly on African strongmen, on African presidents responsible for war crimes. People like Omar al-Bashir. You remember even when they tried Kenya's current president, William Ruto, and Kenya's immediate former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, that African Union rose up in arms, though with the wrong motivation, but they had a valid point that why are you just focusing on African presidents, and you're not focusing on all these other perpetrators? Because the argument was rightly made that all those people who died in Iraq, is George W. Bush responsible? All the civilians who died in Afghanistan, are these American presidents responsible? Why aren't you trying them also? So that is something that we have to revisit, that we must ensure, okay, now they have tried, now they have gone to several other regions of the world, but yeah, we must demand, Lynn, they cannot just, disproportionately. Of course, we want all the war criminals in Africa to be held responsible. We will never protect them. They are part of the corrupt ruling elite that is messing up the continent.
Yes.
But we are saying that as they are held responsible, do not turn a blind eye on those others, because again, it's another form of humiliation and manipulation.
I'm in agreement.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement. And you know, as you're saying it, also for the longest time, what you would see in these ICC cases and courts is just Africa.
Exactly.
Again, black, black,
Exactly.
black, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, it would be amazing to see George Bush, there.
Yeah.
Also answering to the crimes against humanity.
Then if he's innocent,
then it's
just
okay.
like Ruto and Uhuru came.
Go back to your country.
But at least they should be tried.
At least let's see a bit of fairness there. Yeah, I'm in agreement.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with that.
And you know why they're not tried? Again, it shows more humiliation. United States of America, Russia, China, India, they are not part, they have not signed the ICC at all. They are not part of the ICC jurisdiction because they just never signed it, the Rome Statute. They didn't. So, because they didn't, ICC cannot even say, okay, now we are going to get George W. Bush, because they didn't.
Yeah.
Yet they're the loudest voices
Yes.
when things are going wrong, that why are you doing this? Stop doing this. But they cannot be tried.
Yes.
We have to call them out on that, because it's like they're saying ICC is for you people there in Africa.
Not us.
A couple of European countries. But us, no, it's not for us.
But we will have an opinion. We will have an opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can't be tried there, but we still have the right to have an opinion.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That's unacceptable.
Yes.
And it is spiting Africa in a very clever and diplomatic way. And we are saying it is not good. It has to stop.
Yes.
The same way, the United Nations Security Council, Lynn, is also guilty for spiting Africa completely. Because, tell me, how is it that the second largest continent in the world, one of the most populous continents in the world, Africa, 1.5 billion people, second largest, how is it that this entire continent, from Cape Town to Cairo, Nairobi to Lagos, from Mozambique, to Mauritius, across the board, how is it that Africa, not even a single of these countries, or even the entire Africa, through an all-Africa body, is not part of the UN Security Council? Because all the other major continents, if you're talking Asia, you have China there in the Security Council.
Wow.
If you're talking Europe, you have France and Britain there in the Security Council. If you're talking America, you have USA itself there in the Security Council.
Yes.
You have Russia there in the Security Council. It is only Africa and Oceania, but I use the word major continent because Oceania, no offense to them, but we're talking New Zealand, Australia, and, those amazing islands. They are just as worthy of nations as any other nations, but in terms of major continent, it is only Africa that is not represented at all in the UN Security Council. Yet this is the global apex body for diplomacy. Isn't that a form of spiting us?
It is. I think the major one.
Yeah.
Why did we not start with that one, DJ?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's unacceptable. And now I'm saying on this LNN show today that African countries should tell the UN that they will no longer recognize the Security Council if an African country or Africa is not a permanent member of the UN Security Council. They keep putting us there as temporary members.
Yes.
They have this slot for African countries. Today it's Kenya and another one, tomorrow it's another one. But that is just a lot of cosmetic stuff.
Yes.
Because it is the permanent members of the UN Security Council that have veto power.
Yes.
If you're not a permanent member, you don't have veto power. So that elevates you diplomatically. It totally elevates you.
Yeah.
So for Africa to continue being in that body, we should actually start by boycotting those temporary seats. Because I know these things can be gradual. We need to boycott those temporary seats and say we will not sit there until we become a permanent member in this UN Security Council. Because that is, they are basically saying, remember we said that humiliation, this subjugation and domination that is informed by humiliation, is when you're told you're this small.
Yes.
You thought you're like this, but you're actually this small. And that's what the UN Security Council is telling Africa, that you guys are this small, and because you're this small, you don't deserve to be in this UN Security Council.
Yes.
There's no other way of looking at it.
You are not enough.
Yeah.
You are not enough.
Exactly.
Man.
Exactly.
You are not enough.
Yeah.
That they tell that to you straight on. Now you get to decide whether you are enough or not.
Exactly.
Do you want to sit on that table or do you want to make your own table?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you keep, as you talk, we are getting a few solutions here and there. When it comes now to the, broadly, the solutions, what do we have to do as Africans?
Perfect. This is a really, really important section, and it makes sense that we are concluding with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we are now saying that Africans have to be solution-oriented.
Yes.
We have to be the ones who are crafting a new Africa. And we cannot craft a new Africa if perennially, continually, our finger is just...
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, let us apportion blame where we should apportion blame. Let us call out the injustices like we've just done. But more importantly, we have to then craft a new Africa, find the solutions. And it begins by looking again at the man that we started with, Patrice Lumumba. The first solution is for the African to regain that sense of a king, that sense of a queen, for the African to regain their self-worth, for Black consciousness to reign supreme in Africans. Because when inside you, you're awakening as an African and you're walking tall with your shoulders straight, not drooping, that is the starting point of every solution. Because you're now bringing out these solutions, implementing these solutions from a position of strength. So it is so, so critical that we do that. The second thing that is more tactical, but just as important, is this. You actually touched on the solution a bit earlier when you said that you have no sympathy for those who went to St. Petersburg, because what were they looking for in the first place? They needed to be working on Africa. And therein lies a very powerful solution, that we must recommit ourselves as a people of Africa to fixing all the issues that are right here in Africa ourselves without looking for any help. We have to fix all this ourselves, because the reason the United States of America and China and these other countries like to load it over us is just back to the GDP thing. Now, did you know, Lynn, that Africa is already the richest continent on earth? It's just that we are yet to tap fully into these riches. Whether you're talking gold, whether you're talking uranium, all these minerals, Africa has 40% of the world's gold deposits. And gold is as precious a metal as it gets. So we have to recommit ourselves to building our economy in an African way. We cannot leave this matter of building our economy to the economists or even to the politicians. We, the African people ourselves, must become extremely conscious of the fact that what are the policies that need to be in place so that we can build our economies. And one direct policy at a continental level is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area must be fully operationalized like yesterday. All Africans in these 54 countries, we are challenging them today that demand of your government, if it has not operationalized it, to do so. We need to make this an electoral issue.
Yes.
So that if you want to sell these beautiful Maasai sandals from Kenya, I used to do that and I'll resume doing it.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, I want to be part of the solution. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I started selling Maasai sandals to South Africa, Botswana, to experience what does it take. And that's when I saw how, because of taxation at different borders, by the time my sandals arrive in Joburg, whoever is in Joburg has to sell them at almost 4 or 5 times the price so that they can get some profit, meaning that my sandals became elitist. They couldn't just be bought by the ordinary South African, because now the price was pretty high.
Yeah.
You see, now, if Africa Continental Free Trade Area is fully operationalized, it means that I can sell those sandals at $10, and a South African there can buy them at $15,
Yes.
meaning I'll be able to sell even more sandals. And in the same vein, people in Kenya, people in South Africa can be able to sell to Uganda, Zimbabwe, all these countries, those amazing Zulu and Xhosa, artifacts and handicraft, plus many more other things. It doesn't just have to be handicraft.
Yeah.
So we need to make it an electoral issue. This is a very concrete solution. We need to make the Africa Continental Free Trade Area an electoral issue in each of the 54 African countries. Because the more Africans trade with each other, the more they lift each other up.
Yes.
The other thing that we have to also work on, that is a concrete issue, is we must have free movement of people across Africa. And there's an AU protocol that is very, very clear on that matter. Only 4 countries, Freedom of Movement Protocol, has been ratified by only 4 countries. That is Sao Tome and Principe, Rwanda, Mali, and Niger. It needs 15 countries to ratify that.
Yes.
So we are calling on 11 bold, awesome African countries to step up. Step up, because if 11 countries ratify tomorrow, it means you can be able to leave Kenya today and travel to Nigeria, and nobody should ask you for a visa or anything, anywhere. Nobody should do that. Because if you can move freely across Africa, if your goods and products can move freely across Africa, then that means we are truly building Africa's economy.
Yes.
We are truly, truly building Africa's economy. And the more we build Africa's economy, the more we don't have to go begging for any aid or any debt from these countries, whether it's China, America, World Bank, Bretton Woods. So we have to become alive to the fact that we must trade with each other. We must move freely across Africa. Those are 2 very clear-cut, concrete solutions that we need to look at.
I love that.
Yeah.
Electoral.
Exactly.
Pay attention to the manifestos. What is lacking? What do we need to do?
Exactly.
I mean, if we only have 4 countries and we need 11 more, what are we waiting for? Isn't that a good initiative?
Yeah, it is.
If you ask me, it's great.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
It totally is.
It is great.
Yeah. So we need to do that. And there's a whole host of policy solutions that we will keep getting into, in future episodes. But for today, let people understand those 2. But more critically, the starting point being this awakening. Let us go back to Lumumbaism. Let us go back to Lumumbaism. And Lumumbaism is simply the African standing tall, standing proud, the African knowing that he and or she is enough. It's completely enough, and nobody should ever belittle you.
Great.
Because once you know that, then you see how Lumumba, they kept putting obstacles in his way in America that day, but he'd look for solutions.
Yes.
He'd say, okay, now I'm going to Howard University. You don't want to help me? I'm going to Howard University. The reason he even sought military support from Russia, from the Soviets, was because the Americans refused to give him that support. And then the Russians gave him insufficient support. So he was very weak. But what that tells you is that we must have that Lumumbaism spirit of being solutions-oriented and knowing that whatever you place in our paths, we will not stumble and fall down and stay down, but we stand up and keep walking.
We are going to conquer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, DJ. Honestly, the solutions for me are enough.
Yeah.
You see, I'm enough. The solutions are enough.
Yes.
And this is a good way for us to address the problems, but also make sure that we are paying attention to the solutions.
Exactly.
Because in 10 years, we don't want to be here talking about the same things over and over and over. I think what I love about such conversations is everyone can be able to have a take home and start working intentionally towards it.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I know I'm about to see you on your channel. Good job with that.
Thank
as
you so
always.
Much. Yeah.
I'm here telling my people we need to get to 10K subscribers.
Yes.
African Awakening. That is something that is very, very critical and crucial to all of us. And we have to pay attention to some of the conversations that you are putting on your platform, pretty much all of the conversations. And one thing, maybe before I let you go, that I've noticed, you're very intentional on this movement. You're very intentional in contributing to the awakening of an African man. And maybe just to ask, I don't know if I've asked you why is that particular why is it really important for you to make sure that you are contributing? I know I don't take it for granted that every week you are available to have these conversations. What's your why?
Great question as always. And my answer, I'm gonna use the words of the great Thomas Sankara. When he say those 4 powerful words that we must invent the future. We must invent the future. And indeed, he was doing his best to invent the future. And for me, how that links to the African awakening is we take control of our own destiny. We totally take control of the fact that we are the ones to transform Africa into a different place, into a place where every African can choose to remain because they have better jobs here, better food here, better family connections, of course, right here in the motherland. So if they ever travel out, it's just to visit the world, but come back home. And there's zero brain drain because the African brains are more than happy to contribute to transforming Africa. So I will always be committed to the African awakening because I believe it stems from within you. You know, you cannot go to a seminar to be taught a 10-point agenda on how to then transform Africa, because you can still play a role as an expert, but it is often much more powerful if you have that inner drive and you're awakened, you know, to use today's word, you have the Lumumbaism of knowing that nobody is going to tell me I'm this small because I know I am this big.
And I'm enough.
And I'm totally enough. So I believe that starts when we truly awaken as Africans.
Good. Thank you so much. Allow me to wind up here. It's always a beautiful moment to just have this conversation with you. But maybe before I let you go, do you mind reminding our people how they can connect with you and also what you have in store for us in your own YouTube channel?
Great. Thank you very much. First of all, I started this show by referencing Dr. Tamika Cross. And I also want to conclude it by reminding not just Dr. Tamika Cross, but all African Americans, all Africans in the diaspora, whether it's Jamaica or wherever you are, that you are enough. You are enough. We know that a lot of times in your respective countries, you're made to feel like you're not enough, made to feel like you're this little. But we want you to know today that you're absolutely enough and you're as big as it gets. You're totally as big as it gets. We celebrate you, we see you. You need to know that you're part of 2 billion Africans in this world. And you're absolutely enough and you're not alone. Now, that is the premise of my show, The African Awakening, that comes out every Thursday. You need to visit, subscribe, so that every Thursday we can be able to have not just that conversation, but build that movement, because there is a movement. It is a movement that is all about transforming this great continent of Africa. You can all find me on DJ Bokali on all the social media handles, whether it is YouTube, right here, or all the social media handles that you can see. It's just DJ Bokali. And as you find me there, I also look forward to finding you, so that as we find each other, we can truly, truly transform Africa. And I just want to also send a special shout out to a daughter of Africa who reminds me of those great warriors in Benin. Of course, I'm talking about Lynn. Oh, yeah, because just like those amazing female warriors, I truly believe you represent that resilient spirit, that victory spirit, triumphant spirit, that means that the African woman is not a victim, but truly triumphant, even in the face of all the craziness and challenges that are going on. So thank you very much for that, for the inspiration that you continue giving people. And for everybody who is out there, we know that in your own way, you're also inspirations, in the spaces that you occupy, the issues that you're facing, the obstacles, yet you keep overcoming that. And even when you fall down and you feel that, can you really make it? Just the fact that you're willing to give it another go is proof enough that you are an inspiration in your own way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you are also an inspiration. So thank you so much for your kind words. You caught me off guard, but viva.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Amandla.
Yeah.
Saweti.
Yeah, maybe soon me and DJ will start a party of national movement of enough. I am enough.
Yes.
You can because you can,
Exactly.
Yeah, but guys, allow us to say bye here. Thank you. This has been a very, very enlightening conversation. I've learned a lot about Patrice Lumumba. Such an incredible person to have existed. I believe his spirit is still around us. So these are some of the people we need to look at and pick key lessons. They did not live for nothing, and they did not die for nothing. We have to be able to look at the history and the lessons and, say you might not be here with us body-wise, but your soul and spirit is right here with us, right? So I appreciate you tuning in. Let me know what your take home has been on today's very beautiful conversation. And while you are at it, please, 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 please head on to DJ's YouTube channel. Very, very thought-provoking conversations right there. And I love that he's walking through this journey with all of you in mind. So go and show him some love by subscribing to his YouTube channel. 100,000 subscribers. Here we come. And I want you guys to be part and parcel of that movement. So go subscribe to his channel and tell him we always appreciate every time he comes here at LNN to help us with key lessons in this platform. So that's not something that I take for granted. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in. What have I left behind? Nothing. Just a reminder that I'm really grateful to everyone that continues to subscribe on this platform. I know we have many, many, many new subscribers here in thousands. So that's not something I take for granted. So even from me and on behalf of the rest of LNN team, I just want to say thank you for trusting our platform one story at a time. Hopefully I see you guys tomorrow, 10 a.m. Take care. Bye-bye.